Okay, are we ready? Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. It's now 10 a.m. We'll start with roll call. Jessica Clayton, District 2 here.
Dawn Cash for District 3.
The notice of the meeting was properly posted on October 16th, 2023. We'll start with number 1, discussion and possible action regarding approval of the minutes of September 21st, 2023.
I'll move approval.
Okay, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, number 2 is discussion and possible action regarding policies, processes, procedures, and status reports related to the planning, oversight, and administration of Oklahoma County's grant program. Welcome, Nikki.
Good morning.
I'll motion to receive these documents.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you, ma'am.
Aye.
Good morning. So there has been a lot of movements with grants since the last time we met about 3 weeks ago. So what I've handed you is the updated grants watch list and the highlight on the side of each grant denotes a change or a status update. So I'll just go down the list starting from the top and just kind of give you the update that I have. And if you have any further questions on that particular grant, please feel free to stop me and we can discuss and have conversation. So the first one is the EECBG grant, and that was a energy savings grant that we applied for last year. We decided as a county that we wanted to submit a voucher for this particular grant, and they had not released any information for the voucher just yet. Now the EDA has recently released voucher information. I've been going to webinars and kind of watching how to do the savings plan and the blueprints for the voucher and kind of what we want to do. But that voucher information will be released in November. So once we get that voucher, then we'll know how to move forward as a county. But what we thought we would want to do is we would want to do solar panels over in metro parking. So that was kind of the thought on that one. So then we have the Department of Mental Health and the Department of Mental Health and the Oklahoma District Attorney and us for the it was the mental health funding. OMES just released the RFP for this. So the close date on it is in December. So we're still kind of working out the logistics on how exactly we're going to submit for this grant. So we're just kind of working through that. Like I said, OMES just released the RFP last week. And so we're just kind of thumbing through it and kind of seeing where we are on it.
On that one, if I might, as you know, this is the savings from 780 and 781 that is made available to the counties. So in some discussions with some of the people involved, it appears that the best way forward will be for the BOCC to enter into an MOU with the presiding judge, the DA, and the public defender for them to receive this money as a pass-through from us. And then if there are agreements that are necessary with other entities, that those three would enter into those agreements. So I think that's the direction that we're probably going to head on this. So
I'm sorry. Which one is the 780 and 781?
that's the second one. It's the
Oh, okay.
yeah, that's that Senate Bill 844.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, so that And as Nikki said, I think they were rewriting maybe some of the pertinent parts of that grant. So I think that's probably ultimately how it'll all play out.
This is the one you're working with
Thanks,
Melissa
that-
on.
that worked.
Is this the one that's Melissa?
Kelly Basie?
Kelly Basie, yes.
Okay, thanks, Nikki.
The TSEC grant, that's dead. It's just, we weren't ready for that. We didn't have just a series of events that just led us to not being ready for that particular grant. I will put it on the calendar for next year for an option for us to kind of look into next year. The opioid abatement grant, the Attorney General pushed the LOI back to 10/25. That's next week. We anticipate submitting our letter of interest next week for that one. So then we have the Oklahoma County EDA and Workforce Economic Development Grant. As you can see, that grant was submitted on October the 2nd. We asked for 700,000 on that one. So once we know more on that one, we will let you know. But it was submitted, so a win. Oklahoma County, we also did a grant with ACOG DEQ. It was the air quality grant for electric chargers, electric vehicle chargers, in Metro Building 1 and 2. We are going to increase the voltage that we have currently in the garages for the spaces that we have with OG&E in partnership. And in addition to expanding what we have and increasing the capabilities for us to be able to charge more cars and reduce and make our air quality better for the state. So that was submitted. We asked for $1 million, and there is a 20% match on that one. And Facilities has agreed to honor that match, and so we did go forward on that, and so we're super excited about that one. And that was submitted 9/28/23. The solid waste program, that is something that we submitted for last year as well, I believe. Yes. The close date was 6/30. So the update on that is that District 3 is the only district that said that they wanted to participate in that one. And we do have a reimbursement for one chainsaw thus far. So that's what we do have on that one. But I believe you can get up to $3,500 worth of whatever it is that they're trying to get. It was chippers, chainsaws, a couple of other options. And District 3 chose chainsaws. So that's where we are on that one. And lastly, we had the Oklahoma County District Attorney, Department of Justice, and the Juvenile Diversion Program. This was a collaborative juvenile planning grant, and we were successful in submitting that on 10/10. This grant is a doorway for us to get more funding to actually implement a juvenile diversion program. So this is the very first part of the grant. It's planning. We have a collaborative together, a strong group of people, individuals that are working together to create this diversion program. And that is all I have on the grants. So we were very, very busy this last month.
Great work. I appreciate the
Can we
Follow-up.
talk a little bit about how grants come to you?
Sure.
Is it generally a department or someone that has seen a grant will come to you and ask you to begin working on that? Is that kind of the process?
Yes.
Given that at times you put a lot of work into beginning that process, and then I think some questions arise as to, who's going to do it, how's it going to work, et cetera. I'm wondering if it might be beneficial at the time that you get that request, rather than immediately starting to work on it, that you would bring it before this group with as much information as possible for us to review ahead of the meeting so that we can be informed and ask you questions to determine whether or not that's worth your time to pursue.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Agreed.
Is that something, Nikki, that you think would be beneficial?
Yes, I've actually started a grants checklist. Um, so it's just a grants request form is kind of what I've started to create, and a lot of the questions that you just I've asked on that same form.
Awesome.
So it's just a little bit of information, and it might be helpful for me to have something to actually bring to you guys to put in front of you that's tangible that you can see. And you can see that the department, the point of contact, what type of funding it is, if there's a share cost involved, a brief description of what their project is. Is this project shovel ready, turnkey ready? Just some basic information that you guys can also kind of, gain knowledge and kind of know what direction we would like to go in. So if you want me to proceed with that, I would love to. Or if you have any other guidance as to how I can get this information and better translate it to
Yeah.
you guys, that would be great
I
too.
think that's perfect, Nikki. And
Okay.
then in the intervening period, as you're working on that, then bringing it, once you've got the packet ready to submit, if you will, bringing it back to us so that we can see the full contents.
Okay.
And then we can make a recommendation to BOCC to approve or not is.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I like it. Very good.
How do you feel about the time constraints with some
Well,
grants?
and that was actually something I had written down. Are there times where you're getting people that approach you to do a grant where the time frame is really condensed and you're having to, there's not a lot of time for you to review and or do homework or for us to review, where we might be better off saying, hey, that's a wonderful idea, but we need to wait.
Yes.
Okay.
There are.
So what is an approximate, I know every grant is a little bit different, so, but what is an approximate amount of time that you need to fully be able to vet a grant, and then for us to review it, and then the BOCC, is it, 6 months?
I mean, I think 45 days would be sufficient. I mean, just so that it gives me enough time to get it on the schedule. Um, it- I also think that it can vary because there are some grants that are there. Some departments are just ready. They've got everything together, and a grant deadline may be in 2 weeks, but they've been working on it and they've kind of anticipated this grant, and so they've kind of gotten everything in a row for me. And so that's different. It would just be the logistics of making sure that it goes through the process of P&G, then the BOCC, and making sure that I have enough time for that. But I mean, if it's a really big grant, I mean, I think 3 to 4 months is a safe time, to say, I can work it, I can understand it, I can talk to the right people, I can make the right connections, get the proper letters of support. That's a major thing in grants right now, are letters of support, and making sure that we have our partnerships together. I mean, I think safe 4 months, but if we want to go super fast and shotgun it, I mean 45 days.
Okay, I think that's something that we need to continue to maybe try to define, because you're putting in an awful lot of work, and then there are a lot of questions that probably need to be answered at times. Do we have, because we can apply for the grant doesn't mean we have the statutory authority to actually be able to implement the programs that the grant might allow for. So being able to check all those boxes to know that we're in a position to utilize the funding. So being afraid to say, I'm sorry, you got to me and the time frame is too condensed, I think we need to be able to put her in a position to do that.
I agree.
I agree. My overall vision for your team, if you will, and I've talked about this offline, is that eventually we'll be in a rhythm for you where we have a schedule. And I think right now, as we're more and more of us become aware of the availability of utilizing your skills to in this process to move forward, I think we'll see both a better structure evolve is my hope. But also, I do think there'll be periodically, we've seen several here already where we didn't know they were coming and they pop up and they clearly apply and we want to go with it. So I wouldn't want to build in any constraints that keep us from proceeding. But as a general rule, I think that you need to have some guidelines and some backup from us that I agree with Joe completely that there are times when we're just going to have to say, we can't move forward on that one, period. We've got too many already going or something. So
And I think one of the things that I think hopefully we can address is this issue of having partners, whether they be nonprofits or others, that rather than us just, we can be in control of how we approach those partners. If we have some time. So if we get a grant and we need a nonprofit to do X, Y, and Z, then we could potentially do an RFP for a provider to be associated with that grant, and still make it within the time frame for submittal. Those types of things, by letting us see as much up front as possible. So, Nikki, I appreciate all your work. I know you're slammed and probably frustrating at times. So
No,
you're doing a great job.
thank you. It's a great pleasure. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. So thank you.
agreed. Thanks, Nikki.
Get a motion to receive report.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So number 3 is the discussion regarding our employees of the month, and we are going to strike this item.
Yeah, we can ask Karen to bring it next month as October and November. So I'll move to strike.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 4 is discussion and possible action regarding an update related to the data collection grant. Billingsley.
Good morning. You probably already aware, recently the Crime and Justice Institute provided their updated report on the criminal justice system here in Oklahoma County, and particularly there are some sections on pretrial release, which I wanted to bring to you today to discuss and see if there's any movement we want to do on our end and their recommendations for pretrial release. There are a few of them, and they kind of intertwine with each other on their recommendations, but I wanted to provide you with those so you had them for today. First one is criminal histories. The recommendation from them is that we would provide criminal histories on everybody who's booked into county jail. That would be provided for the courts to help them make a decision on an individual's pretrial release. Currently, through policy-wise, we're not able to provide those on everybody. Perfect example is the folks that are booked in on exclusionary crimes from the mandatory exclusionary crimes list. However, with this recommendation from them, if that's something we wanted to take and change, then it would require, which is kind of another section that they mentioned in here, the eligibility list for OR and conditional bond folks, to expand it. That would include taking another look at that exclusionary crimes list and considering revamping it, changing it, doing away with it, anything on that end. So that was the first recommendation. And in addition, it would be, I would have to go back and do a little more research on how many more workups or criminal histories we would be performing a month. But obviously, as you know, the more work, the more requirements, the more staff, the more funding.
And so, Grant, for the sake of making sure I understand correctly, the exclusionary list that you're referring to is actually the list that was adopted by, for lack of a better, the BOCC, the Court Services Advisory Board, and
The
the
presiding
presiding judge. Is that correct?
Correct.
Because statutorily, there used to be a list of 40 or so that only could be released on pretrial if it went to a district judge.
Correct.
And that's now changed, so it's any judge.
Any judge. Correct.
And so of that statutory list of 40, there's 21 or 22 on the list that the BOCC and those other groups approved?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And that's the list that is being recommended that we do away with,
Essentially, yes.
with the statutory exception of there are
So
some
there's-
domestic violence related crimes that just can't be
Right,
touched.
and that was recently changed too in the statute. There's 3 stalking, violation of EPOs, and any domestic violence that those individuals cannot get out on any pretrial release. So other than that, correct. Yeah, that would be relooking at that exclusionary crimes list to expand the eligibility for those folks.
Okay, and doing away with that list, it's not necessarily meaning more people are being released. It's just meaning you're providing more information to the judges so they can make that determination, which they've always been able to make.
Right, because I mean, as it sits right now with the workups we do and the information we provide to the courts, about 25 to 30% are denied now. So I don't. It could, I don't know, provide more approvals. However, the folks that are on that mandatory exclusionary crimes list are the charges that we aren't even delivering now, are more serious offenses. So, yeah, it would be just providing more the criminal history information to the courts.
Okay, and as
in
it
the pretrial
stands
process.
today, those 22 or so that you're not looking at for your pretrial release program, there's still being information provided to, is it the public defender,
So we
a
send.
couple of judges and the DA's office regarding those individuals who are down there so that they can,
We send we
Look at
we
that.
send a daily email, 2 separate emails. One are those folks that you were mentioning and have like extensive criminal histories, as well as another email of folks that we're not allowed to interview. The jail staff does not let us interview due to their mental health status. They're not able to pull them for us to do interview. So we also provide that information in an email. So we continue. They're still out there, and there's hopefully still a chance that they could be provided with some sort of services and some sort of release.
is it fair to say that in some manner, you all are looking at that everybody that's booked into the facility, whether or not you might actually be able to supervise their release, but information regarding them is being sent to
Pretty
other
much,
for a
pretty much,
determination?
Pretty
Okay.
much, yeah. Next,
I'm not familiar, thank you for giving some of that background, because I'm unfamiliar with the list. How long has that existed?
21 charges.
How long has that existed? Do you know how long?
Oh,
we've
I'm
had the
sorry,
list?
2008.
Oh, okay, okay, thank you. And that just floats with the statute as it gets amended, the list gets amended?
Sort of. It's kind of 2 separate things. The mandatory exclusionary crimes list we're talking about was those 21 charges were pulled from the statute,
Mhm.
and it was agreed upon by all those the presiding judge, the BOCC, the advisory
And then it's
board
just
that-
reviewed maybe annually as statutes are updated, or it's
No,
not often
we've-
reviewed?
I say there's been some committees created in the past to re-look at that list and either change it or do away with some or add some. It's never actually been changed, but it's been looked at in the past. And I'd be more than happy to start something up again to relook at it. But that's just one thing I want to make sure you were aware of. And if we wanted to move forward on that, we certainly can. But again, that was a recommendation, which kind of intertwines with number 3 I have here, expand eligibility for OR and CBR, which I mentioned, which that would be one way to do it.
So backing up to, I better understand the list, what was the previous recommendation with regard to the list?
As far as,
You started with, here's this recommendation regarding this list. Tell me what that recommendation was.
oh, well, it came with doing criminal histories and workups on everybody. However, we're not able to do those on a certain group of people booked into county jail because of this.
Unnecessary to do that for those on this
Right.
list. Okay.
Right.
Thank
Right.
you.
And then next would be the suggestion. I know you've
Let-
oh, sorry.
For Grant to be able to comply with the recommendations so that he or court service, not really Grant, court services is not seen as an impediment to getting people out of jail. This really needs to be resolved at the level of the presiding judge, the Court Services Advisory Board and the BOCC to make a determination whether or not they want to revise the list or eliminate the list.
Next would be, and we've discussed it here before as well as in the advisory board, the potential implementation of a validated risk assessment tool or an evidence-based risk assessment tool. If you remember in the past, we've had a presentation here as well as our advisory board from the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse on the ORAS, the Ohio Risk Assessment System, the pretrial tool. And there was also some funding that would have came along with it. It didn't go anywhere. It was not approved. It was discussed in our advisory board, and it was decided we would not move forward with it. However, it continues to be mentioned as something that would be a recommendation for any pretrial release department. Again, CJI, that was one of their specific points, was implementing something like that. I did reach back out to them specifically on what assessment tool they recommend we would implement. They mentioned two. The first one was the ORAS, the Ohio Risk Assessment. The other one was the PSA, the Public Safety Assessment, which was, again, it's a validated tool from the Arnold Institute, John and Laura Arnold Institute, that's been created. There, according to them, that is the most popular, the go-to assessment tool that's out right now. It essentially does what the other one does too. We would use the NCIC check and do a full background, and based on that check, we would be able to see all the different categories that are listed on that: violent convictions, nonviolent convictions, failures to appear, a whole list of things. And again, I need more time to research into this, so I don't know all too much about it yet. But it would be a validated risk assessment tool that would be able to use. And with that also, that one does not require an actual interview with the defendant in jail. However, we may still want to do that to ask a few questions. However, it's not required for this particular assessment, which may solve a issue of we don't always get to interview our folks in the jail, because we fully understand with jail staffing issues that they're not always able to pull for us. So this may potentially could resolve that issue as well. So I wanted to bring that to you too. Again, these are just recommendations that were provided to us that we need to look into to consider.
You mentioned funding. What does a program like that cost?
To implement the
Those
assessment
assessment,
tool, I still have to look into it. This
Oh.
is all brand new and scratching the surface.
The
and-
funding that he's referring to is, had we implemented,
Oh, I'm sorry.
whereas the Department of Mental Health was willing to provide us with $100,000 a year that Grant could have used
Oh my gosh.
to hire additional staff. I think at the time we were looking at data possibly, and another case manager
That's
or
right.
some type of liaison to help folks get the services they might need, like
Right.
homelessness, medication, job training, et cetera. That's the funding I think he was referring
Sorry,
to.
I apologize. Yeah.
You know, what I'd like to see, because this is a continually an issue that's brought up, is that the Court Services Advisory Board step up and take a look at this and make a recommendation. And so if you present them again with ORAS and more information, did you say it's PSA?
PSA, correct. Public Safety Assessment.
On that or any other risk assessment tool?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, we can do that. And just one last thing, since we spoke last, I did mention the request by our advisory board to provide some additional racial data as we collect to provide for them on a monthly basis. I've had 3 additional Zooms with our Connexus Cloud database to see if there's something they could do to give us the ability to pull that data and provide it. And they finally did tell me that as it sits right now, moving forward, Connexus Cloud does not have a mechanism or a means for us to do that. They're still going to try to look into it to see if they can change their program to allow us to do that. However, as it sits right now, it cannot be done. And for us to do it, it's there. Like we mentioned, or we discussed last time, that data is there. But again, for us to do it, we would have to come up with a status. So I would give you a perfect example: failures to appear for a particular month. There's no report that just you can put in a parameter and hit a button and it gives that to you. You would have to go in one page at a time on one particular person and scroll through a month to find that month, and you would have to see a name, Jessica Clayton, and then you'd have to change that screen, go back in, go to that profile, and then look for race, and then do a tally mark, and then find the next person. So it's there, and then right, and
It's not easily reportable
not even close.
because the system that was suggested to us that would be able to fulfill that doesn't work, has never worked for that purpose.
For that
Is that
purpose, no.
correct?
Right.
That system is useful in being able to notify those that are under your supervision when they have court dates, et cetera. But for the data part, that was one of the reasons that it was so highly recommended, has never worked.
Right, correct. Yeah, it works fine for, we can send text message, court date reminders, and those, and even for our case management, just to put in a profile and see who they are, when their next court date is. That works okay, but right, the data collection piece isn't there.
And when you're looking at collecting data, right, race, gender, et cetera, that's important, but there are other things that probably need to be collected, right?
Sure.
It's easy to say Grant supervises 100 people and 30% are this and 30% are that. But what's also, it would seem to be important to tell the true story of how court services is functioning. Really, it's not you, but is when you send something over to a judge, is the denials of each of those individuals based upon that same demographic, right?
Right.
So you could potentially do that as well, right? So
Right.
we get a fuller encompassing picture of.
Right. Yeah, if we had something that could pull that data, yeah, it would be even better. It's just, it's not there. Some of the smaller categories maybe that have, some data that you would want that would have a small number of people. I mean, it wouldn't be too bad to go in and look at each individual's profile. But if you wanted to know right now everybody who's being supervised and what that category is, you're looking at over 500 people. That it's just not possible.
Yeah.
So,
And so we should be able to, ultimately, I guess the aim is to be able to say if the PD is representing X number of people, they would pull demographic information related to all kinds of identifying characteristics and produce that. Is that right? It kind of, that's what we want.
sure,
Is-
yeah,
is
yeah,
Who makes up our criminal justice population and what are their identifying characteristics?
sure, right, yeah. And the whole, how they even get there from, call for service to arrest to booking. I mean, it's a whole process to get to an endpoint.
Several years ago, BOCC invested, approved, I don't exactly remember, case management systems for the public defender and the DA's office. You don't have access to that, is that correct?
We do not. We've requested access in the past, but have not.
Are you aware if that software, you may not be since you never got access, would have those types of reporting requirements and help assist you in your?
I don't know. I will look or ask.
Okay.
Again, I mean, we weren't provided the access to it. However, I could ask the questions and see what it could provide.
Okay.
If it's something we could use.
So again, it's not that you or your department don't want to provide information. It's that you don't have the ability to readily do that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Okay, so moving forward, just so I'm aware, is for the next advisory board, I'll go ahead and put an agenda item on there and discuss the potential maybe addition or recommendation of a risk assessment tool. And that's it for now.
The risk assessment tool, you're going to continue to work with the provider that's never been able to provide us the data in an easily attainable form. You're going to continue to work with them. I think I asked you last time maybe to look for other potential suppliers. And that effort's ongoing.
So yeah, and that's the other. I'm glad you mentioned that. I did ask the folks at CJI that specific question. Do they know of another pretrial release department or another group in the country that is using a particular case management database that also helps with data collection that they like and that is working? And they did tell me that, to the best of their knowledge, there's not one group out there that has a case management database that they like, that works, that provides good data. But she did provide me with some additional information on the PSA that we talked about, the risk assessment. There was, I think it was 12 different case management databases that, and again, I have to dig into more of this and how it really works, but they, I guess, speak to each other. So this risk assessment that you would implement or put in their criminal history somehow speaks to a database and puts it all in. Again, I'm just barely scratching the surface on that, but it's even on their website, and it lists those different companies that have those databases that can do that. So I have in the process of putting some phone calls out with some groups that are using the PSA, and just to get some more information on if they like it, how it works, how they use it, how long it took to get implemented, and all those questions.
Yeah, I think advising the advisory board of that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's all I got.
Thank you for your hard work. Y'all motion to receive report.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then number 5 is discussion of possible action regarding the processes, policies, processes, and procedures of the ARPA allocation, funding allocation. Thank you, Danielle.
Good morning. We are going to use the PowerPoint. Yep, perfect. So this is just going to be a little bit of a recap of where things are at on all of your projects, including subrecipients, and just kind of like a big fund overview and then a more narrow per project overview. We'll move a little bit quick and just highlight specific items, and then if there's individual questions, we can address those as well, because there are quite a few projects. So first, going over our fund status, you've seen this slide before. There are a few minor changes, one being the increase of approved projects. The last time you saw this slide, it had an 80 number there versus an 81. District 1 is looking to fund the Health Alliance for the Uninsured with their remaining ARPA dollars for the county projects, and so that will increase that number to 81. The fully expended number remains the same, and then importantly, your remaining unauthorized amount remains the same at that 2.7 of your total 152. That's what's been expended or remains available, and then expended today is that 2.1 number. So you've also seen this slide before. Important small changes as well. The last time you saw it, the amount that had 0 expended was 39. So some projects have moved because that is now reduced down to 34. And you'll see that change in the over 50% expended. It was at 16, and now that is at 21. So those are your big changes there. In this amount, the Health Alliance for the Uninsured is not yet captured because it hasn't actually gone through all of the approval processes. So you're not seeing that in the expended or unexpended amounts, just simply because it hasn't gone through the motions yet. This will also be reduced significantly in the projects that have no expenditure the next time we present this, because your subrecipients are receiving funds. At the BOCC meeting on the 11th, I believe, we had about 14 invoices that went through, and so you'll start to see that number change as well as they are implementing their funds. This is just a quick update regarding uniform guidance changes. So this isn't something that we will see until 2024 if they make any changes, but there are 3 important call-outs during this public comment period. The first one being about the single audit threshold. Right now, if an organization receives $750,000 in total dollars of federal funding, they receive a single audit. There are conversations to potentially increase that to $1 million. That would be the one that is probably the most relevant to the county, and then the second one being the equipment threshold reporting, going from the $5,000 to the $10,000 amount. There is also options when it comes to the de minimis rate, from taking that from 10% to 15%. We're not anticipating making that change for any of our subrecipients, as the agreements are already in place, so not likely to see a change there, but the other 2 are potentially influential for both the county and the subrecipient. So just something to be aware of. We won't know if any changes will actually be made until 2024. So that kind of takes us as an overview, updates on general process and where total dollars are at. So this is for our internal departments. So these are all your county departments. What we've done here is we've taken what was authorized by the county, so how much funding we've said that project is going to get, what has been obligated so far, so what there is a PO for, and then what is expended. So that's your dollars out the door. Your percentages on the end, you have your obligation percentages and your expenditure percentages. So that is based on the authorized amounts. So as you can see in this very first one, it's a good example, the revenue replacement. It has been 100% obligated. It's been moved out of the 1415 fund and put into the jail account, but it has not been expended. Those dollars have not moved from that account. So while it is obligated, it is not expended, and those expenditure deadlines are still relevant to these projects. They will still need to use that $10 million by 2026.
I thought revenue replacement was exempt from all of those requirements. Can we double check that?
It still has to be expended, but it doesn't have to fit within the EC categories, which is why it can be used towards the jail.
Okay.
On the second one, this is just a good example. You'll see a couple more as well with the 100% across the board. Those are the projects that the county has already closed out. They've been fully expended. If there were any dollars remaining, they have been rolled back to the 1450 account already to be obligated in other ways. And then something to look at for 10028, your juvenile bureau COVID testing, you'll see that there are 2 zeros. So that's something to see. That there's zero obligation and zero expenses. They already have a contract in place right now. We're aware of that for their COVID testing. That's something that when that contract expires, they'd like to use these ARPA dollars to move forward with continued purchase of tests. So it is showing as zeros right now, but it is something that we're tracking, and then we know the department may want to continue moving forward with. But this just kind of gives you an idea of where your projects are at within their status, how much has been used or not. So you'll see this as well. This is just kind of, again, your overviews. You've got a lot of great projects like your countywide radios that are at 80% obligated and 77% expended, so getting really close to those final times. And then you have some projects that are highly obligated, like your HVAC in Midwest City, but aren't quite yet expended because they're still going through some of those infrastructure pieces. Here you'll see that again with your detention center projects. They're beginning to get obligated, but obviously not yet expended, as those have been ongoing conversations and kind of that recontracting process. But then excitingly, you do have some other projects that are fully expended, such as your COVID medical claims and other IT projects. And then your juvenile bureau has obligated their funds for their violence intervention and telemental health programs, which are really, really exciting. Part of why those are not fully expended yet is because the contracts are on a monthly basis, so the vendors are paid monthly. So you'll continue to see that number increase as we move forward. Here we've got a lot of great closed out projects. You will see a couple of social services projects that are showing at zero. We are working closely with the department on those, specifically the homeless navigator. They are getting really close to fulfilling that position. There was a little bit of nuance in the best way to pay out that position. They don't have a special revenue fund in the way that the sheriff's office does. So you're not able to take the funds directly from 1415 and give them to the department because it would have to go through your general fund process. And in doing that, there would be a really large delay in getting somebody paid. So to avoid that, we've been working with the department, HR, and payroll to kind of suss out what would be the best option for that. We've recommended, and everyone has agreed, that just pulling straight down from 1415 will be the best process. It will be a little bit of work for our departments to make sure that those invoices and things get on budget board, but it will make it easier in the long run to get that individual paid and keep them from being a contractor and have them be an actual employee. This is only a position that is funded for 30 months, so there is a close date on that staffing position so that there's not an ongoing cost for the county. And when they posted for that position, they made sure that was in that as well so that the individual who is hired knows that it is not a long-term position. We've got some more just kind of general infrastructure projects that are kind of going through the works, and then some, again, COVID medical claims that are fully expended. And then that takes us into subrecipients. These were your detention center projects, so these are completely closed out. They were closed out last month or maybe the month before that, and so they have been fully obligated and fully expended. The network upgrades is the only one with the detention center that has not been fully expended, and that's because they have to submit that one for reimbursement as they spend on that project. As they send in those invoices, they're reviewed by our office, and then they're able to get paid for those claims. But that is the only one that they have remaining. And then you'll see for your PBA projects and things like that, the funds have been obligated to PBA, so they've been pulled from the 1415 account, but they're still going through some ongoing infrastructure conversations. And so expenditure amounts, as you'll see, are not there yet. And then that is the same with our subrecipients. A lot of those invoices just went through that BOCC process, but they haven't fully received their funds yet, or they don't have any expenses yet. So these numbers, you'll begin to see changes probably within next month, and if not, the month following. Takes us through all of our subrecipients, and then just kind of our look ahead on work plan. Does anybody have any questions before we move into this section on internal or subrecipient projects? All right. So as you guys have been seeing, this is kind of our updated bi-weekly status plan. We just wanted to kind of walk everybody through it and make sure that you feel familiar with the information that we're providing. In that top box, it kind of talks about what we completed in the previous 2 weeks and then what we're looking forward to doing in the next 2 weeks. So you've seen this one and you'll have seen the next slide as well. And then any kind of risk or action items, when you get it, you'll see it in that very bottom one. So this is something that we've continued to express and will continue to share with you, is that there are certain projects, you know, that aren't moving. You're seeing that with those expenditure percentages that we just shared with you. And if a project is not moving or has stalled for any reason, those are the ones that in December we're going to say, hey, let's reevaluate if we want to continue with those projects or move those funds back to 1415 so they can be reallocated to something else. So that's being one of the main items to be aware of. And at that time, we are going to work towards putting together a presentation on potential other uses of those funds as well, just to kind of give you something to think through. So same logic here. Just as you see this when it comes through your inbox, it's just telling you what have we done in the last 2 weeks and then what are in the next 2 weeks. So this kind of encompasses the past month or so. A big thing to note is the submission of the quarterly report, which is occurring today. After this meeting, we will submit the P&E report for Q3. So that will go into the portal right after this. And then as you can see, since we know that the Health Alliance for the Uninsured is an upcoming project, we've begun working on their risk assessment, their subrecipient determination, their contract, things like that as well. Something we had called out here as well and has already been resolved in that risk log was about the social services homeless navigator position and the best way to fund that. But as I said, we have already met with those departments and have come up with the best path forward. So you'll see that removed on the next report. This is a shorter version of what we just went through in those 2 slides. So obviously compliance and reporting is an ongoing item. It will continue to be through 2026. And we are, as I said, doing the P&E report today, so October 17th. We continue to do the compliance checklist and are creating those for each project that has an expenditure. They get a compliance checklist and we work closely with the purchasing department on that. We're also really excited to have a new collaboration tool with the purchasing department so that our office and their office can more accessibly kind of organize the funds per project or the files per project. So previously we were using a OneDrive, and unfortunately the way that it was structured from the county side, only Chantel was able to move files around once they were placed into the OneDrive. It's been a really ongoing process with IT. She's worked her butt off for it. And so now we're able to actually go in and help her in reorganizing those. So all of the data has always been there, but now it takes that onus off of her. And we're the next piece is about subrecipient monitoring. We do have some slides about that, so I didn't add details here, and we'll just go ahead and skip past that. And then going on with infrastructure projects, as usual, weekly we meet with the owner's rep team during our internal status meetings, so we continue to get updates on their projects and know how the infrastructure items are moving forward. And we also sent the disposition rule email to each of the departments as requested, letting them know about that capital purchases over $5,000. As we noted with uniform guidance, there may be some potential changes of that increasing to 10. If that happens in 2024, we'll again update all of the departments and you guys of that change. But right now it does remain at the 5. And then the local assistance tribal contingency funds, that's just something that is kind of ongoing. We drew down those funds during the last reporting cycle so that they could be allocated during the ARPA process. So this is something as well that when we kind of give that presentation in December of here's how many projects may have items that roll back, this will be something we would want to maybe consider at that time as well. When we say here are new ideas of how to allocate your funds, that would be something that might resolve at that time. They don't have to be allocated just yet, but they do follow the same 2024, 2026 requirements. So just want to make sure that they stay top of mind for everybody. This is kind of our upcoming activities. So as we've talked about the P&E reports going in, the subrecipient management continues to be ongoing and will be ongoing. The 14 invoices for direct payment did go through. We are in regular touch points with our subrecipients. We're meeting with them all the time, but we do want to make sure that we have substantial touch points and webinars as well. So in November on the 9th, we will be having an additional compliance webinar. This will kind of help prep the subrecipients for their quarterly reporting. Right now, since they don't have any expenditures, they will not be in the Q3 report, but many will have expenditures the next time we submit. So we want to make sure that they feel comfortable in getting us the information that is required. We do have a form that's already created that they plug the information into and share with us. They've done a draft round of that when they told us what their projects were, but this will just help us ensure that they are really, really comfortable and know exactly what we're looking for when we are going through that reporting process. Going into that next step of project evaluation, this is something kind of, I've already touched on. Projects with zero expenditures or that have stopped moving, we're going to want to reevaluate when we get into December, and then just continued ongoing compliance and monitoring and research as usual. This just kind of gives you dates of what I've just talked about. So going from October through the end of December, beginning of January, kind of what that looks like as a work plan. So this is our community proposals. Really exciting. There's been a couple of changes on this, as I've said, because they were able to get their funds. We do have now 14 organizations that have received funds. Previously, that was just your home finance authority that had received funds. So now we actually have multiple that are receiving their funds, but don't have expenditures just yet. We are still waiting on about 3 organizations to finalize their contracts. We are meeting with them, working with them, kind of helping them get through those processes. But there are 3 that we are waiting on. Other than that, all of our other subrecipients are moving through the process as they should be. And we have highlighted that in these charts so you kind of know where everybody's at. So these 14 projects are in the complete green because they have gone through the entire process and are receiving their funds. This one, we're just waiting on some signatures on the subrecipient agreements. And then here are 3 that we're kind of waiting on getting that additional information from. The last one being the Health Alliance for the Uninsured, but that is a brand new project, so not a surprise that it isn't, completely through that process yet. That kind of just takes us through all of our updates today. Does anybody have any questions on what has been presented so far? This is our remaining amounts. District 1 is showing it the 333 amount because right now 33,000 will be going to the Health Alliance for the Uninsured. So that's why that number is reduced, and District 2 and 3 remain as they were. But that's all we have.
Thank you for the report.
Absolutely.
You said currently there's approximately 2.7 million
Correct.
available.
That's
Okay.
correct.
And then on one of the slides, says certain projects may not be moving forward, and look at those in December.
Correct.
Are you all going to put that list together?
Yes. We will present that list to you all, letting you know probably first, behind each individually, letting you know where each project status is and then the nuances of those, and then can do a larger report to everybody as well. Particularly, we have some projects that, just haven't trended at the same amount as maybe they had originally, kind of our COVID medical claims being one of them. There was a high projection for that, and we're not seeing it meet that same amount. We don't want to say reduce that down to 0. We obviously want to leave some funds in there, but redo the math on that. What have our trends been so far, and what is a more realistic number? And that may bring a couple $1 million back. It may only bring $1 million back, but things like that are the things that we want to consider. Especially as those 2024 deadlines. It does seem far away, but it will get here a lot quicker than we think, and we want to make sure we have time to reallocate those, or if we're reopening the community portal for anything, really have time to go through those processes. And so we think in kind of denoting those in December, it gives everybody an opportunity to say, okay, we're going to give it another couple of months to see if that project moves, or it's time, they've had enough time to do this and we need to move on with something else.
Where other jurisdictions may have done a community portal and funded some programs and then ran out of available dollars. What's happening across the country if instances where money is becoming available? Are those communities reopening, or are they going back to the list of projects that were submitted and pulling from those, or is it a mix?
I would say it definitely varies. So some places are only doing reimbursements. The county is not, but some places are only doing reimbursement type of projects. So you would have to reopen a portal to understand like what are your new expenditures that you've had, so that they can reimburse on those projects. So it's definitely a variation. I think the number I saw recently, and Jamie, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, and was about 60% of all counties, all states that receive dollars have some substantial level of expenditure, but not fully expended. So the county is not far off necessarily from where other organizations are. You do have some that were able to take revenue replacement and really were able to funnel that money into their programs really, really quickly. But for other communities such as this one that didn't have that option, it is a slower roll in kind of getting processes out the door. And then everyone is facing those same constraints of finding available resources when it comes to infrastructure projects, who is able to actually provide those labor and services. So it's definitely a mixed bag depending on how you're able to implement your funds, and then how the county or state decided to use funds. Some only did subrecipients, some only did beneficiaries, some only did reimbursement. So it's varies all across the country. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I'll motion to receive report. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Citizen participation? See none? Any board comments?
No, thank you.
None for me. Any new business? Seeing none? And I'll motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.